Dino Ciccarelli, January 6, 1988, Toronto. What started as a regular hockey game ended with the first NHL player ever sent to jail for what he did on the ice. This is the story of NHL players whose crimes shocked the hockey world while they were actively playing in the league. Back to Ciccarelli. During a game against Toronto, the Minnesota North Stars forward struck Luke Richardson repeatedly with his stick. The police didn't just leave it to the league to handle. Ontario prosecutors charged him with assault. That spring, a judge sentenced Ciccarelli to 1 day in jail and a $1,000 fine. It was the first time in NHL history that a player went to jail for something that happened during a game. The message was clear: hockey violence has limits, and sometimes those limits are enforced by actual courts, not just the penalty box. The Washington Post covered the case extensively, noting how unusual it was for hockey violence to be punished by a criminal court. Wire services and local papers across North America picked up the story, making it clear this was a watershed moment for professional sports. But the most shocking case in NHL history involves Mike Danton of the St. Louis Blues. In April 2004, Danton was arrested by the FBI for trying to hire a hitman to kill someone. The intended target was widely reported to be his agent and former junior coach, though Danton later claimed it was his father. The FBI had been tracking the case and set up a sting operation. On July 16, 2004, he pleaded guilty to federal murder for hire conspiracy. That November, he was sentenced to 7.5 years in federal prison. The NHL had seen fights and dirty plays, but attempting to arrange a murder was something else entirely. There is no parole in the U.S. federal system, but with standard good time credit and a transfer to Canada, he served about 5 years before release in 2009. Danton would eventually attempt to restart his hockey career in Europe and lower leagues. The league has also dealt with domestic violence cases that ended in criminal convictions. Slava Voinov of the Los Angeles Kings was arrested in October 2014 after a domestic incident that sent his girlfriend to the hospital. According to police reports, she had suffered injuries that required medical treatment. The NHL suspended him indefinitely while the case played out, showing they were taking the matter seriously from the start. In July 2015, he pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor charge of corporal injury to a spouse. The judge sentenced him to 90 days in jail and 3 years of probation. The probation terms included staying away from the victim and completing domestic violence counseling. After serving nearly 2 months in jail, Voinov faced another problem. As a Russian citizen in the United States on a work visa, his criminal conviction triggered immigration consequences. He was taken into immigration detention upon his release from jail. Rather than fight deportation proceedings, Voinov decided to leave the United States for Russia while facing immigration detention. The Kings terminated his contract, ending his time with the team. Even though a judge later dismissed the conviction in 2018 after he completed probation successfully, the damage was done. When Voinov tried to return to the NHL in 2019, the league still imposed an additional suspension through the 2019 to 2020 season for what they called unacceptable off-ice conduct. The message was clear: even if the courts were done with you, the NHL might not be. Austin Watson of the Nashville Predators faced similar charges in 2018. Police arrested him in Franklin, Tennessee in June after a domestic incident. According to the police report, officers responded to a call and found evidence of a physical altercation. The next month, Watson pleaded no contest to misdemeanor domestic assault. The court gave him probation and ordered him to complete a 26-week intervention program. These programs typically involve counseling, anger management, and education about domestic violence. The NHL initially suspended him for 27 games without pay, one of the longer suspensions for a first-time offender. The NHL disciplines off-ice conduct case by case under CBA Article 18A, as there isn't a standalone written domestic violence policy. The league also runs a joint substance abuse and behavioral health program, but the Players Association filed an appeal on Watson's behalf. A neutral arbitrator, someone agreed upon by both the league and the Players Union, reviewed the case and reduced the suspension to 18 games. The league publicly expressed disappointment with the reduction, releasing a statement that they disagreed with the arbitrator's decision. This case highlighted an ongoing tension between the league trying to take a hard stance on domestic violence and the Players Union protecting its members through the appeal process. Some of the most famous criminal cases in NHL history actually happened on the ice during games. Marty McSorley became infamous on February 21, 2000. The game between Boston and Vancouver was almost over, with just 19 minutes and 7 seconds gone in the third period. The Boston Bruins defenseman struck Vancouver's Donald Brassier in the head with his stick. Brassier fell backward, hitting his head on the ice and suffering a severe concussion. The entire incident was caught on video and replayed countless times on sports channels. British Columbia prosecutors didn't treat this as just another hockey fight. They charged McSorley with assault with a weapon, arguing that using a hockey stick to deliberately strike someone in the head went far beyond the accepted violence of hockey. The trial took place in British Columbia Provincial Court. On October 6, 2000, Judge William Kitchen found him guilty. The judge gave him a conditional discharge with 18 months of probation, meaning that if McSorley completed his probation successfully, he wouldn't have a permanent criminal record. The NHL suspended him for 1 year, which effectively ended his career since he was already 37 years old and never played in the NHL again. Todd Bertuzzi created another dark moment on March 8, 2004, in what became known as one of the most vicious attacks in NHL history. The Vancouver forward grabbed Colorado's Steve Moore from behind and punched him in the side of the head. Moore fell forward onto the ice with Bertuzzi landing on top of him, followed by other players piling on. The fall and pile-up that followed fractured 3 of Moore's neck vertebrae, gave him a concussion, and caused nerve damage. Moore never played professional hockey again. The incident wasn't random. It was widely seen as retaliation for a hit Moore had delivered on Vancouver's captain Marcus Naslund in a previous game. British Columbia prosecutors charged Bertuzzi with assault causing bodily harm. On December 22, 2004, he pleaded guilty and received a conditional discharge, 80 hours of community service, and 1 year of probation. If he completed everything successfully, he would have no criminal record. The NHL suspended him for the rest of the 2003-04 regular season, 13 games, and the entire playoffs, 7 games, making it 20 games total. He forfeited about $502,000 in salary. Moore later filed a civil lawsuit seeking millions in damages for his lost career and ongoing medical issues. That case dragged on for a decade before settling in 2014 for an undisclosed sum. The Bertuzzi incident led to widespread discussion about violence in hockey and whether the league was doing enough to protect players from deliberate attacks disguised as hockey plays. The league's history with drunk driving cases shows a troubling pattern that goes back decades. Craig McTavish of the Boston Bruins struck another vehicle while driving under the influence in January 1984. The collision killed Kim Radley, a 26-year-old woman. McTavish's blood alcohol level was more than twice the legal limit. In May 1984, he pleaded guilty to vehicular homicide and DUI in Massachusetts. The judge sentenced him to 1 year in jail. McTavish served his full sentence and was released in May 1985. Remarkably, he returned to the NHL the next season with Edmonton, where he not only had a long playing career, but eventually became a coach and general manager. He won multiple Stanley Cups as a player and was the last player in the NHL to play without a helmet. His case raised questions about redemption and second chances in professional sports. While some believed he had paid his debt to society and deserved to continue his career, others felt uncomfortable cheering for someone who had caused a death through drunk driving. Danny Heatley's case hit the hockey world especially hard because it involved the death of a teammate. On September 29, 2003, the Atlanta Thrashers star was driving his Ferrari at an estimated 80 miles per hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone in Atlanta. He lost control of the car, which struck a wall and split in half. His passenger and teammate Dan Snyder, just 25 years old, died from injuries sustained in the crash 6 days later. The Fulton County District Attorney initially charged Heatley with first-degree vehicular homicide, which carried a potential sentence of up to 15 years in prison. The case took over a year to resolve. In February 2005, Heatley pleaded guilty to second-degree vehicular homicide and related misdemeanors, including speeding and failure to maintain lane. The more serious first-degree charge was dropped as part of the plea agreement. The sentencing was heavily influenced by Snyder's family, who had publicly forgiven Heatley and opposed jail time. Graham Snyder, Dan's father, even spoke at the sentencing hearing in support of Heatley. The judge sentenced Heatley to 3 years of probation and ordered him to give 150 speeches about the dangers of speeding. The judge also restricted him to a vehicle with 6 cylinders and a speed limiter under 70 miles per hour. The case showed how victim impact and forgiveness can influence criminal sentencing, even in cases involving death. Mark Bell's case demonstrated how DUI consequences can follow a player across teams. Bell rear-ended another vehicle in California in 2006 while playing for the San Jose Sharks. His blood alcohol content measured 0.15% or more, well over the legal limit of 0.08. The victim suffered injuries including neck and back pain. Bell initially fled the scene but later turned himself in. In August 2007, he pleaded no contest to felony DUI causing injury and hit and run. The felony conviction was significant because it carried more severe consequences than a misdemeanor DUI. The judge gave him a 6-month jail sentence, but allowed him to serve it after the 2007 to 2008 season. By that time, Bell had been traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs. He served his sentence in a California jail during the 2008 offseason, using work release programs that allowed him to leave during the day for training. The NHL suspended him for 15 games at the start of the 2007 to 2008 season, costing him approximately $200,000 in salary. Nikolai Khabibulin's case showed how DUI enforcement varies by state. Police stopped the Edmonton Oilers goaltender near Phoenix in February 2010 after observing him speeding and weaving between lanes. His blood alcohol level tested at 0.164, more than twice Arizona's legal limit. Arizona has some of the strictest DUI laws in the United States, with a special category called extreme DUI for blood alcohol levels above 0.15. Khabibulin was convicted of extreme DUI, which in Arizona carries mandatory jail time. In August 2010, the court sentenced him to 30 days in jail, fined him over $1,500, and ordered him to complete alcohol treatment. His license was suspended for 90 days, and he was required to use an ignition interlock device for 1 year. Khabibulin appealed the conviction, arguing that the traffic stop was improper. After the appeals court rejected his arguments in July 2011, he accepted the sentence. He served part of his time in actual jail and was allowed to serve the rest through work release and house arrest, wearing an electronic monitoring bracelet. The NHL has also dealt with drug-related convictions that shocked fans. Bob Probert of the Detroit Red Wings was one of the league's most feared fighters, but his troubles with substance abuse led to serious criminal charges. Customs officers arrested him at the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel in March 1989 after finding 14.3 grams of cocaine hidden in his underwear. He was crossing from Canada back into the United States after a night out in Windsor. Probert pleaded guilty in July 1989 to importing cocaine, a federal crime. That October, the court sentenced him to 3 months in federal prison at the Federal Correctional Institution in Rochester, Minnesota. He also received 3 years of supervised release and had to spend time in a halfway house after prison. The conviction created immigration problems that lasted for years. While on U.S. federal supervision after his cocaine conviction, international travel was restricted, so he couldn't accompany his team on Canadian road trips for a period. The immigration issues weren't fully resolved until a federal appeals court ruling years later. Kevin Stevens represented another fall from grace. In 2000 in the St. Louis area, Stevens was arrested in a motel room in a drug-related incident and received probation and treatment. He returned to the NHL in 2001-2. Years later, in 2016-17, long after his playing career, he pleaded guilty in a federal oxycodone distribution conspiracy case. Ryan Malone of the Tampa Bay Lightning faced both DUI and drug charges in a single arrest. Police stopped him in Tampa in April 2014 after observing him driving erratically. Officers found him to be under the influence of alcohol and discovered cocaine in his pocket. The dual charges presented different legal challenges. In August 2014, Malone pleaded no contest to the DUI charge, accepting the standard penalties including fines, probation, and license suspension. For the cocaine possession charge, he entered a pretrial diversion program. This program allowed him to avoid a conviction if he completed drug counseling, community service, and stayed out of trouble for a set period. If successful, the possession charge would be dismissed entirely. The Lightning bought out his contract shortly after the arrest. Jarrett Stoll's arrest made headlines because of where it happened. The Los Angeles Kings center was arrested in April 2015 at the Wet Republic Pool at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, a popular party spot. Security found him with drugs, and Clark County prosecutors initially charged him with felony possession. In June 2015, Stoll's attorneys negotiated a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to 2 misdemeanors, 1 count each of trying to commit a crime and provoking commission of breach of peace. These were much less serious charges than the original felony. As part of the deal, prosecutors dismissed the felony drug charge entirely. Stoll received no jail time, but had to complete 32 hours of community service and attend counseling. The Kings did not re-sign him after his contract expired that summer. Rick Tockett's case involves something different from violence or substances: illegal gambling. The former NHL tough guy who had become an assistant coach with the Phoenix Coyotes was implicated in a gambling ring investigation called Operation Slapshot by New Jersey State Police. In 2006, authorities accused him of financing a nationwide sports betting ring that handled over $1.7 million in wagers over 40 days. The investigation found that several NHL players had placed bets through the ring, though not on hockey games. Tocchet pleaded guilty in 2007 to conspiracy to promote gambling and promoting gambling. He received 2 years of probation and had to pay substantial fines. The NHL suspended him indefinitely, but later reinstated him, and he continued his coaching career. The case raised concerns about gambling in professional sports, especially given that several active players were found to have placed bets through the ring. Going back to the earliest days of criminal charges for on-ice violence, we find cases that set precedents for how courts would handle sports violence. Dave Forbes of Boston became part of legal history on January 4, 1975. During a game against Minnesota, Forbes butt-ended Henry Boucher in the face, causing an eye injury so severe it required surgery and helped end Boucher's career. The attack appeared deliberate, coming after Boucher had checked Forbes earlier in the game. A Hennepin County, Minnesota prosecutor brought aggravated assault charges, making this the first time in the United States an athlete was criminally charged for conduct during a major professional sports game. The trial became a media spectacle, with legal experts debating whether criminal courts should intervene in sports violence. The jury deliberated for 18 hours but couldn't reach a unanimous verdict. The trial ended in a hung jury, so Forbes was neither convicted nor acquitted. The NHL had suspended Forbes for 10 games, which at the time was considered a severe punishment. Dan Maloney of the Detroit Red Wings faced charges for an attack that occurred during a bench-clearing brawl in 1975. During a game against Toronto, Maloney attacked Brian Glennie, who wasn't even involved in the initial altercation. Maloney punched Glennie from behind and continued hitting him while he was down on the ice. Glennie suffered a concussion and missed several games. Ontario authorities charged Maloney with assault, causing bodily harm. His case went to trial in 1976, with the prosecution arguing that the attack went far beyond normal hockey violence since Glennie wasn't even engaged in fighting. The defense argued that violence was an accepted part of hockey and that criminal courts shouldn't intervene. The jury acquitted Maloney, establishing an early precedent that juries were reluctant to convict for on-ice violence unless it was extremely egregious. These early cases established important principles about when criminal law would intervene in sports. Prosecutors learned they needed clear video evidence, serious injuries, and conduct that went far beyond normal play to get convictions. The Ciccarelli conviction in 1988 succeeded partly because attitudes had shifted, and partly because the stick swinging was so clearly outside the bounds of hockey. The evolution of the NHL's response to criminal conduct shows how the league has struggled to balance player discipline with public relations concerns. In the early days, the league often took a hands-off approach to off-ice incidents, viewing them as personal matters. Commissioner Gary Bettman, who took over in 1993, gradually implemented more formal policies, especially after high-profile cases generated negative publicity. The league didn't have a formal domestic violence policy until after the Ray Rice case in the NFL generated widespread discussion about how professional sports leagues handle domestic violence. The NHL disciplines off-ice conduct case by case under CBA Article 18A, as there isn't a standalone written domestic violence policy. The league also runs a joint substance abuse and behavioral health program that emphasizes treatment over punishment. However, these suspensions could be appealed to a neutral arbitrator, as seen in the Austin Watson case where his suspension was reduced from 27 to 18 games. For substance abuse issues, the league has taken a different approach. Players who voluntarily enter the program for drug or alcohol issues are not suspended, though they may be suspended if they refuse treatment or fail to comply with their treatment plan. This approach differs from criminal cases where players face both legal consequences and potential league discipline. The financial impact of criminal convictions on NHL players goes beyond just legal fees and fines. Players who are suspended lose their salary for those games. A 20-game suspension for a player making $5 million per year costs them over $1.2 million. Teams can also terminate contracts in some cases, as the Kings did with Slava Voinov, though this often leads to disputes that are resolved through arbitration or settlement. Immigration consequences have proven particularly severe for non-North American players. A criminal conviction can lead to visa revocation, making it impossible for a player to continue playing in the NHL even if they avoid jail time. This was a major factor in Voinov's decision to leave for Russia rather than fight deportation proceedings. Similarly, Probert's cocaine conviction created years of complications for crossing the border between the United States and Canada. Insurance and endorsement deals are also affected. Players with criminal records may find it difficult or expensive to get the insurance required for their contracts. Corporate sponsors typically have morals clauses that allow them to terminate endorsement deals if a player is arrested or convicted of a crime. The reputational damage can last long after the legal case is resolved. These cases represent more than individual failures. They show a pattern the NHL continues to deal with today. From domestic violence to substance abuse to financial crimes, the league has seen players fall from grace in ways that shocked fans and left real victims behind. The NHL has since implemented stricter policies, including mandatory education programs for rookies about avoiding legal troubles. But the debate continues about whether these measures are enough. While some players faced justice through the court system, others saw charges dropped or received minimal sentences. The league's response has evolved over the decades, with suspensions growing longer and policies becoming clearer. The creation of the Department of Player Safety in 2011 gave the league more tools to address on ice violence before it escalated to criminal charges. But these cases serve as permanent reminders that even professional athletes at the top of their game can make choices that destroy careers and harm innocent people. The victims in these cases often fade from public memory while the players' names remain known. Kim Radley, killed by Craig McTavish's drunk driving, was just beginning her adult life. Dan Snyder had his NHL career, and life cut short at 25. Steve Moore never played professional hockey again after Bertuzzi's attack. The domestic violence victims, whose names are often protected by privacy laws, dealt with physical and emotional trauma that lasted long after the legal cases ended. For more deep dives into the darkest moments in sports history, subscribe below.